Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Wrestling with Reality podcast. My name is Kris Kloss, as always, joined right there, that way, Eric Melikian. And the Wrestling with Reality podcast is proud to have Southwestern Pro Wrestling Powerhouse veteran who is trained and worked with numerous promotions and alongside superstars in the world of professional wrestling, longtime friend of the Wrestling with Reality podcast. And hey, him and I think we crossed paths here and there. We'll talk about that. West Coast Wrestling Connection 2016, 17, NWA 08 to 10. And hey, Gabriel Gallo, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you, pal.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. How y'all doing?
Thank you.
Good,
it's great
man.
to see you. It's been a while.
Wow, that was a really good introduction. I need to give that to the ring announcer next time I go in the ring.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
So, Gallo, give us a little introduction about yourself, how you broke into professional wrestling, and how things just took off for you.
Well, I don't know exactly how it took off. I first got into wrestling. Well, I guess you can say I dipped my toe in back in '98, I believe, is when I first started. I first found a place to start training. I had answered an ad in the Phoenix New Times about pro wrestling training. I just remember like it was this weird situation that happened. I had always wanted to be a wrestler, and I watched every single episode of Raw and WCW that I could, and I fell down a flight of stairs at work, and I had almost shattered my ankle. Like it had like bent, and like my heel touched my calf. It was really bad. And I was looking in the Phoenix New Times, which is like this free newspaper down here where all the concerts and everything you wanted to look at was in it. And so saw this ad for a not free, but pro wrestling training with immediate tour of WWF, ECW, and WCW, right? That's what the ad said. So I taped my ankle up. I went to this tryout, and I wound up trying out at this place and getting in. And I trained for like 3 months there in this garage in the middle of the Arizona desert in like 118-degree weather, where we spent half the day outside working out underneath this tent with weights, and then the other half of the day inside this rickety steel building with a beat-up ring that wasn't really safe. And basically, they just took our money and beat the hell out of us until we broke and left. And I wound up breaking my ankle in that ring because the ring was real shoddy. And I remember they kicked me out because I couldn't make the weekly payment to come. And they told me to, like, if I couldn't beg, borrow, or steal the money, that I wasn't worth being there. And it took me like a year, I think, to be able to walk again, right? Because I really messed my ankle up. It was bad. And then I wound up, I kept looking, and I was about to go to Les Thatcher's school. It was funny. I wound up bouncing at this bar with this other guy that wound up wrestling later on by the name of Tommy Drake. And he was going to Roland's school at APW, and I was going to Les Thatcher's school in Heartland. That's where we were both just about to head. And I wound up meeting this guy named Joel in Phoenix, who had this wrestling radio show about wrestling. And he introduced me to CC Star, who then introduced me, who was this old-time wrestler. He used to do jobs for AWA and WWF, who lives out here. And he was starting a promotion with this other old wrestler named Bob Yuma. And they were training in this, like, lumber yard. And I remember I went to the lumber yard right the same day that they got kicked out of the lumber yard for, like, safety reasons for them being in there. So I didn't hear from them for a while. And then the next thing I know, I heard CC had the ring set up in his backyard. Excuse me. So I went there for the first time, and I was introduced to Steve Eastloss, Navajo Warrior, who met me, and then that day basically said he was going to train me. And then I met Mike Knox, who was trained by Nav, and he was helping train guys there when he was in town from California. And then I met Horseshoe, Luther Reigns, who also was trained by Nav before he went to the power plant, and he was there training guys too. So my whole first 6 months of actual real pro wrestling training was with guys that were really good and guys that were at the power plant training that style. And we were doing this in the Arizona desert in the backyard. And then after that, I wound up wrestling for Western States Wrestling out here, which was just starting out. And about 3 months into the shows, I started teaming with Nav, and it was a whirlwind after that. Once I started teaming with Nav, we were on the road every weekend for the next 3.5 years, 3.5 years, probably 3-4 days a week. So
And what year was that? Around
that
what
was
year?
about, I started in October of 2000 was my first match. So by the time it was January was my first time, I think, I teamed with Nav. And then after that, I remember that night, the first night that we teamed, that night we loaded up and left and drove off with the Ballards in the ring and went to a Henry Hubbard show, which was my first road show. And we teamed that night, that next day, against the Ballard brothers. And after that, it was literally every single weekend for 3 years straight. We were gone. We were in Japan, Florida, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, everywhere.
Wow. You know, we're going to dive deep into all this, but I want to ask, what was your training like, Steve and, Luther Reigns and all those guys?
Well, for me, it was cool because I really wanted to wrestle. And like, to me, I was willing to do anything, So like, and there was a bunch of different training styles there. So you had Nav, who was really good at explaining stuff, and there was Horseshoe that was like really just good at scaring the hell out of you into doing anything he said, because he was insanely crazy and ginormous, 290 pounds, and just like a spark plug. And so he was like super intense. And then there was like Knox, who was just like a wrestling like savant. Like, this guy was a genius when it came to anything. So he was really good at teaching everybody. And then I remember the guy that taught me how to bump was a guy named Sin, who was this luchador that got trained in NorCal by all the luchadors up there. And it was just good because it was such a diverse mix. I got the best of like all worlds. I got trained by guys that were high flyers. I got trained by guys that were all big men, and I got trained by the guys that had worked in a lot of wrestling psychology. Like CC was an old jobber, so he was good at like selling and making things look really good and how to tell a story in the ring, and so like I got a good mix of everything. So, but my training, really, if you think about it, like, because we trained in that backyard for a while, and then we went into a building, and we trained there where the school is at for a while. But the most of my training, because like I said, I started training with them the beginning of 2000, and my first match was by October. By January, we were on the road all the time. So I would like to say that the most of my training actually came on the road with Nav. I learned how to bump and lock up and wrestle and all that in the school, but I learned how to actually like wrestle and how to apply it and put it all together on the road. And that was all just by screwing up and having the guys in the back tear it apart with like, because we'd get done doing those Henry Hubbard shows, and we go in the back and there'd be Public Enemy and, Jimmy Snuka and Greg the Hammer Valentine, Barbarian, and all those guys that would do all the old military base shows. And so you got to sit back there all day long and hear them talk about the shows and matches and stuff. And then you got to go back and have them all tear your match apart, So my training, I think, was pretty good. It was very diverse. Like, it went to all ends of the spectrum, but none of it even prepared me for when we started going to like UPW and doing TV matches, because I was trained to do all the old school, right, 25-30 minute indie matches. And then that was a whole other level of training when we started going to UPW in 2002, because then we had to start learning how to do all that condensed down into 3 to 5 minutes. So I got kind of, I guess, like in my first 3 years, I probably got a real good crash course on how to do a little bit of everything. And it was all live action training. It wasn't like there was like it is today, where there's schools set up everywhere and you can go train. Like I said, I trained in the backyard for a month, actual backyard wrestling. Kind of funny. All the kids would sit around the fences and watch a bunch of guys just bump in this ring. And then we moved it, once we got enough money saved up, we all moved it into a building, and that was the first school. It wasn't like there was a lot of schools around, there was Heartland, there was APW, there was UPW. That was it that I knew of. So it was an interesting time back in the early 2000s.
It's completely a little bit more of the Wild West back then.
Yeah.
So You teamed with Navajo in your first match, correct?
No, my first match, I actually I did singles my first couple matches. My first match was against this guy named the Ripper. And it was at a place. My debut was at a boxing gym called Madison Square Garden Boxing Gym in Phoenix, Arizona. So I've always said I debuted at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
I just leave off the rest. But I remember this guy came out wearing a trench coat. Oh God, what a shitty first match. I remember he came out and he's smoking a cigarette as he walks to the ring. And he walks around the ring smoking the cigarette, puts it out, gets in, takes off his trench coat, turns to me and goes, "I'm blown up. What are we doing next?" And he was the 25-year veteran that I was supposed to bring me in. It was the worst 7 minutes of my life.
Who was Ripper?
Exactly. He was just in Arizona when I broke in. It was the remnants, because there wasn't a lot of wrestling out here. It's like I didn't know of any. It had died out for years, so he was like the remnants of the last Arizona Wrestling Federation that had been around. And from what I heard from the majority of it, from what I've met from most of the old guys, that most of them were a bunch of dirt bags. Like they were just trash. Like there was a couple cool guys, but for the most part, all of them were just like, typical dirtbag indie workers that took the money and ran most of the time. It was a shady territory back in the day, from what I heard. Like a lot of guys didn't say good things about the Arizona territory.
It was like you said, Eric. It was the Wild West, and like and you said, at the time, late '90s when you get started, a lot of that remnants was still around. And it was like, wrestling was this closed society, closed group for so long that it kept operating in that mafia-like way for a long time. It continued that way until the new group got in, and that was kind of the end of that wave. I would say I started in wrestling where we didn't know we were at the end of the wave, but we were in that mafia world was still operating, and into the early 2000s is you start to see the business change quite a bit, but boy, yeah, that was still in play quite a bit all over.
It's weird. I used to be told all the time, like everybody, like Nav used to tell me, he's like, don't always necessarily brag that you're wrestling from Arizona. He's like, a lot of guys, like he used to say, like Kevin Nash, a lot of the guys used to talk mad crap about the guys from Arizona because they were so just not. I never heard any good stories about good business dealings with any of the Arizona guys. Like the last story I heard is like the last time they actually had a televised TV show in Arizona for wrestling, they burned an American flag on it, lost their TV deal the next day, and there was never a wrestling company out here again. And then like everybody that I heard would do a show would wind up getting the crowd so mad at them, like demanding their money back, all kinds of stuff. So
isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that that they almost did that in WWF for WrestleMania 7 lead up with Hogan and Slaughter? They Vince wanted to burn the American flag, and they were like, they all said, "Hey, no, let's just burn a Hulk Hogan T-shirt." Like, unbelievable that old style in wrestling was still, again, that mentality was still there at that time, even though we were already into the 90s.
Yeah, well, like. Well, and again, like I think most wrestlers, especially like, now it's different because now wrestling is about TV, for the most part, once you get that level. Back then, wrestling was still about the crowd. So the thought of losing a TV contract because you offended advertisers or something, like, who thinks of that? We're here to offend people and make a reaction. You know what I mean? Like, I get the idea behind it, but then at the same time, you're like, oh man, bad business, dude. From looking at it from now's perspective, you're like, way to turn off a lot of business.
Yeah.
But wrestling, like you said, was so much different back then. And especially when you had guys that really didn't care because they were all about the money.
Yeah.
It was a different time back then.
Right.
But I didn't meet good guys. There was good guys back there, like Mike Contreras, that was a good Arizona wrestler back then, and like Cowboy Bob Yuba was the guy that was running the shows. He was an older guy, so there were still some good guys. But
was that Ripper Savage or a different guy?
Just a guy named Ripper. I don't know. I've never seen him. I think I've seen him like once since then. He came out of the woodwork to do the shows because they used to work for the old Western states or whatever it was, I guess. There's a couple guys like Black Mamba and them that came out and expected everybody to kiss their ass back then. And all of us, like you said, they were the old school guys. So they came in thinking they were king shit. And we didn't know nothing. Like, we're all green guys and the veteran guys. Now I look at it and I realize what they were doing. They'd roll their eyes and be like, yeah, you got to be respectful to them. But now, knowing what I know, they were like, yeah, these guys are jokes. Just let them do their thing. We're just using them until we get new guys and, away they go. Which is rough to say, but it's true. It was just, different times, different. Yeah. And we were building something new. It was like you said, it was the year 2000. It was, we were all trying to do different things at that point,
Right.
So Attitude Era was in full effect. It was wrestling was changing real fast.
Yeah.
So
tell us about, you said quickly into your, beginning, you broke into UPW. How did you get into UPW and what were your experiences like there?
UPW was cool. Navajo was going to UPW before he brought any of us. Like, he started there, and I think he got Knox in there, I think is how it worked. And then eventually he brought Horseshoe out, got the contact for him. And then as we all got better, me and because there's me and Hollywood Yates that were training together. As we got better, he brought us out. Once me and him started teaming, he got us in there. And it was really cool because, all of a sudden we come from doing, I come from, like I said, I got the best of both worlds. I'm living my dream the first couple of years, wrestling on all these indie shows and learning the business and watching, the old guys that I came up watching on TV. And then next thing I know, I'm in this locker room and training at the school where it's guys like that are up and coming. You got Samoa Joe, you got Cena, you got all these guys in there, Tom Howard's the trainer, you got Smelly, you got just a whole slew of guys, Nathan Jones and John Heidenreich. And all of a sudden now you feel like there's pressure because now it's like all these guys are trying to get a job. You walk into this locker room and you walk into this company and you're like, oh, these guys are training for a job. These guys are trying to get signed somewhere. And I remember like that was a cool experience getting used to that. And then like I said, the 3-minute matches, walking out and being like, oh, you have 4 minutes. And I'm like, what? 4 minutes? We don't even tie up in 10. What are you talking about? We're going to do it all in 4. And all that was a great learning experience. It was cool, like I said, and learning how they do like, well, at that time, TV, I think it was like one of the first ones doing live internet broadcasts. They were doing like rough cuts. So they were doing like these live internet streaming things back in like 2001 to 2002, which was kind of cool. And everything was being filmed like TV. It was really cool. It was a good experience, like I said. And Bassman was the guy running it with Tom Howard being the head trainer. And they would get us into like WWE backstage all the time, trying to get they were constantly selling us out, trying to get us booked in movies, trying to get everybody booked in commercials, trying to get everybody booked in WWF or WWF at the time, WCW, ECW, Japan. So UPW was a great experience. It got me in a lot of places. It was cool. So that was a really cool thing to do back in the day. It got a lot of people started, if you think about it. Like even today, there's people that are still on TV that all started,
right,
or went through there, if not started there. The Miz started there. He got trained there. Cena went there. Samoa Joe went there. Like I said, like there was just Kazarian was there. Like Christopher Daniels was there. So it was such an amazing, especially now thinking back about it. I probably didn't appreciate it as much then as I should have, especially since I was so green. I was really just like, like a goldfish in a really large pond, just trying to make my way at the time. Looking back, it was such an amazing experience to be around like something that wound up becoming the future, or the seeds for a lot of the future of the business.
Yeah.
What were your interactions like with Rick Bassman?
Always interesting. Always interesting. I like Rick. We got along good. He was a cool guy. Well, I still talk to Rick upon occasion. He's living in. I know. Last time I talked to him, he was living in Hawaii. I don't know where he's at now. I think he's dealing with cancer right now. But I've always had good interactions with Rick. There was a few times when he would pull me outside and yell at me for being an obstinate, loudmouth kid, but everybody does that to young wrestlers at some point in time.
Memories and interactions with the real deal Damian Steele.
I didn't know Damian that well. I only met Damian once or twice.
Okay.
Every time I saw him, I'd always be like, "That guy's so good on the mic." Listening to him cut it, his intro, just him announcing himself was always entertaining as hell to watch. But I really didn't know Damian Steele that well. He wasn't there that much when I was there. I think he was in XPW at the time.
Yeah,
so that was
back and forth a bit.
That was what was going on too. When I started in UPW, I think it was like I said 2001ish, with UPW. XPW was the other big company in LA. So there was kind of like that no, if you worked there, you didn't come here type thing. Yep. I wasn't really privy to too much of the business then. I don't know if it was then like it is now with a lot of the companies, where it's like, total soap opera drama crap. But I remember then there was the dividing line, like you couldn't go work for them and come work here. For the most part, every now and then there'd be the guy that would show up or whatever. But I remember after they closed down and Messiah did a match for us, it was like a huge deal because this guy from XPW shows up on a UPW show, even just to do one match. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It was just different back then. Like I said, now I think that with the event with YouTube and everything, it seems to be a lot more cutthroat. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't find there's a these rivalries that become real. That's kind of frowned upon now. Like no, you let the guys work, and don't even start a feud. You promotions, you don't.
Yeah. See, that was the other thing then too. Like it's way different now. Is there was a lot less watering down of guys because of that. You couldn't go work for different promotions. Like if you worked for one, you were pretty much there, which kind of made you a commodity, especially if you really busted your ass and got the ticket draws going and you were the main person there to see, because they could only see you in one place. And if you did leave, it was kind of a big deal because they didn't see you anywhere else. So if you left, it was something. And even back then when there was less of the internet and less, it was more of the tape trading still back then in the message boards. That stuff still got around pretty quick, especially in the dirt sheets. Might be a month behind, but that was fast back then in wrestling.
Yeah.
It would spread through the locker rooms more than it would before it would ever hit the fans still back then, So you'd hear about it in the cars and you'd hear about it in the different locker rooms real quick. So, see, that's the other thing is wrestling was so different than even in the spread of information because there was no cell phones. Yeah. There was no internet. It was all telephones and answering machines and dial-up message boards. The business was so much better then.
and waiting for television. You produce television, you got to wait to see what happened on that show. Like it wasn't in real time like it is now.
Yeah, and they used to tape, because they would tape 2 Raws back then. When I was younger, in the late '90s, they would tape 2 Raws in a row, and unless you were really on the message boards, which a lot of people weren't, you didn't know the results for the next show.
Right.
You might hear rumors here and there, but you didn't know. Now you know what's going on before it even hits the TV.
Well, and then
now you know what's going on before they even film it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then the early mid 90s, they would tape same what they did with Challenge and Superstars. They would tape one show for 4 to 5 weeks worth.
Yeah, you'd be there for like 8 hours.
Yeah,
just taping, and then they would have to redo stuff too because it would mess up. Now if they got to do that, it's the biggest news in the world because everybody knows about it. Every cell phone in the building caught it. So
yeah, it's so different, man.
And it's like you said, like when Messiah showed up in UPW, it was a big deal. Like it was great to be a fan back then because you actually had a lot more to look forward to because things were just so different. You weren't given, 100 different things at once.
Yeah, I remember when WCW got bought out and ECW was gone and all those companies shut down and WWF got a lot of those contracts, and I remember like UPW was about that time one of the developmentals. It was a WWE developmental, a WWF developmental at the time, whatever the 3-letter name was, and so was Les Thatcher at Heartland, and I think OVW was open then, or it was being built. I'm not sure. I don't remember. That was a long time ago. I've been hitting the head a lot, but I remember they sent a lot of the guys to Heartland, and then they sent a lot of the guys to UPW. So I remember that was a cool time to be in too, because not only do you have all these, guys that are going all over the country wrestling, and we're all going to Japan and doing all that kind of stuff in our company. Now all of a sudden you got this influx of guys like, Juventud Guerrero, and you got Chavo, and you got Rey Mysterio that come over, and then you had like Sean O'Hare, and it was a pretty cool experience. You know what I mean? Now, it was funny too to see how it divided up, because like Heartland would get a lot of the guys that could work, and we would get all the muscle heads in UPW, because like California was known to be the guys, I guess, all the muscles. So I remember like for a while we got Chavo and Ray, but then they got shipped out to Heartland real quick to where the guys that could work were at. UPW was known to be all the 6 foot and bigger, 250-pound jack monsters. So we wound up getting Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Hare, all those big guys. You know what I mean?
Well, you guys were the closest to Venice Beach, brother.
It's true. I remember. I remember just walking into the locker room, and you'd see those guys constantly in the back. I remember every time I'd see him there, I'd walk in, and Kazarian would be sitting there eating a thing of tuna out of a package. Everybody was just on a constant diet all the time, because you're trying again. Business was different. It was a business about the body, and every single person was trying to get noticed and trying to get looked at and trying to be seen. So it was not. The whole place was nothing but protein powder and protein farts.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? and hot stuff. You walked into a locker room and it smelled like sweat socks, hot stuff, and protein farts.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
Oh, that's a weekend right there. That's the smell of the weekend.
Right.
So I know
and how much and then you were like, you go back home to your woman, and it's like, gosh, you really appreciate her more now.
Y'all spray more of that perfumey stuff in the bathroom.
Yeah, this is awesome.
So tell us a bit. I know you told me a bit that you interacted a lot with John Cena, and he did a lot of shows with you guys in Arizona. Can you tell us a little bit about your time during that?
Yeah, Nav was the one that interacted with him a lot more. I remember when I first met John was on my first road trip. So I did my first match at Madison. My second match was against Hollywood, who, like I said, who wound up being Wolf in American Gladiators. That's that last version of American Gladiators. And he was a rodeo clown, so he was like already used to getting the shit kicked out of him by bulls. So he was a pretty tough kid. So we all trained, and my second match was against him for Steve Gatorwolf in Winslow, Arizona. So we go up there, and the first thing I see walking in, setting up this ring, is this jacked G.I. Joe looking guy come walking in that I remember had forearms and hung like this off of him. And they would just like sway. He was so massively jacked. And a super funny guy, super cool guy. He teamed with Knox that night. I remember he was a really cool dude. We all went to Denny's. He was the only one that could back up a trailer out of the place. I remember that. But other than that, I'd only see him at a couple shows. Nav was the one that was with him the most. Nav was the one that really worked with John in UPW a lot. By the time I actually was in UPW all the time, John had already left for OVW. He came out and worked for us at Western States like 3 or 4 times, 2 or 3 times. I think 2 or 3 times. He was like our special guest referee in a match for me and Nav against the Ballards for the tag titles. I remember that at the finish of the first tournament for the tag titles, he was our special guest enforcer referee or something like that. And I remember he got in and took us out and put the Ballards over for the belt. And then the next time he was out there was against him and Nav. And I remember that was the first time I actually saw like a long drawn out, like good indie match. Was between those two guys. I know a lot of people say Cena can't wrestle or anything like that. I know that's like the big thing on the indie marks or whatever. Cena knows how to work, man. They had a really good match. Nav still has it on his YouTube, and you just got a guy that when you look at a guy like Cena, he looks the part so much that it you know what I mean. All of us just were like, what? Like, I remember first meeting him, and all of us were like, well, what do we do now? There's this giant monster walking out. None of us could ever look as good as that, But other than that, all the experience were good. I remember one time when he was signed backstage, or he was already signed to the company, and I was backstage doing some extra work or something. I had really long hair, and everybody thought I looked like Connor McLeod or Duncan McLeod from Highlander. And I remember the seamstresses at the time wanted to meet me just because I had this long ass hair, and I was all 21 years old, 22 years old, embarrassed and shy, and I didn't. I'm green as grass backstage. WWE, this huge thing. And Cena got mad because I wouldn't go say hi to him, so he grabbed me by my hand and walked me like a child to the backstage area all the way to the seamstresses and did the most uncomfortable thing ever and left me back there and walked off. So he was always a good guy, always a good dude. So
why don't you tell us a little bit about your experiences working for WWE? I know you've done a few things, throughout the years for them whenever they were in Arizona.
Yeah, whenever they come through, I would either get booked to do extra work, or I would, roll around in the ring and get looked at, or I would sneak in to try to do the same thing. That was happening a lot back then. A lot more sneaking in than getting booked. That was kind of like the game back then. Now it's virtually impossible to do, but back then the game was kind of like if you could get in and get dressed out and get by that ring, guess you're an extra. if you get used, you'll get paid. So that was what I would do a lot. I'd go there and I'd watch and I'd watch guys like Fit and DeMont and all those guys whenever they were there training with the people, because before every show, everybody would get in the ring and roll around. And if you were an extra, a lot of the times you'd be the one that they would practice on. So I was always there trying to learn every little thing, paying attention to everything from the guys like Regal and everything that they were talking about. That was the majority of what we would do. Or we'd get booked by Bassman and show up there with like 30 people in a row, and there'd be like a group of 30 of us when they told only like 3 to show up, and we'd all get in trouble for Bassman bringing us in like that. But that was kind of cool too, because then there was no way we weren't being noticed because there was a giant group of us. Other than that, I remember we did a lot of extra work. I did a couple dark matches. We did the bodybuilding thing with Scott Steiner. I know some people still remember that.
Absolutely.
That was pretty cool. That I remember. We were supposed to do a dark match, me and Nav against Knox and Hollywood, and then something got switched around and it wound up being Nav and Hollywood against Sakota and Knox, I think. Something like that. And it was me and Nykirk in the back, and we were watching because we weren't used. And then Terry Taylor came up and goes, "I need you guys." And then turned into that spot, which wound up being everybody in it too. And I just remember at the end of it, I guess McMahon watched it and said, "Send those boys another check. They did good." And we all got paid twice.
Well,
wow, that's great.
Yeah, it was a good time. That was fun. I watched Scott Steiner pick up Derek with the military press, Nykirk, and because we were going over the spot in the back, and drop him on the ground like a sack of potatoes, and it sounded like a freaking carton of eggs hitting the ground and smack it, just smoked it. Yeah, good times being extra at the WWE.
Well, I got to see you even so.
I got to wrestle Kozlov one of the times I was there 2 nights in a row. That was fun. So getting the giant massive headbutt to the chest and thrown around by a 290-pound Sambo expert.
Now, did you ever get any feedback from like when Bruce Pritchard was in talent relations, whether it be at UPW or any of the other talent relations guys, when you would do spots for WWE? Did they ever give you any critiques or any input about maybe possibly getting signed?
Yeah, they would. Terry Taylor would come out. Percy Pringle, he would come out a lot. Paul Bearer. They'd send out Tom Howard, or not Tom Howard. Bruce Pritchard's brother, Dr. Tom. Mm-hmm. He came out a few times, and yeah, he would always give everybody feedbacks after the shows, or if we would do like training seminars at the Raw Training Center, and they would all come out and watch. And they would give everybody feedback. sometimes it was general, get bigger, do this, do that. Other times they would actually pull you aside and give you more in-depth feedback. But they were there trying to get everybody signed. Like they were looking for people, especially before that, because they were coming off the war, the Monday Night Wars and stuff. They were looking for new talent to constantly keep those ratings up.
Yeah.
So they were always there looking at people. They were constantly, and it wasn't, if they were even back watching the videotapes, they would let Tom Howard and them know if they needed to someone to work on stuff, because they were constantly sending them reports back, but the majority of the feedback you would get on, not so much on getting signed, but just on how to get better, would be also when you were there training in the ring beforehand, so, but it was a different time again back then. Like I said, for the most part, you wouldn't really get much feedback other than it was good if you had a match and you'd spend time trying to catch Johnny Ace as he was leaving, talking on his cell phone. He'd usually be walking by you with a cell phone in his ear, and you're trying to catch his attention just to see if you did good, if they liked you, if you could get booked again, if you could send in stuff for him to watch, so that I'm sure everybody that's ever been backstage remembers those days of standing in the halls waiting for him, trying to talk to him, sometimes it was very disappointing, but the business.
Different time. You had to, in a lot of ways, I truly believe you had to pay your dues, and it was a lot harder to get noticed than it is now.
Well, yeah, because you had to now there's people watching, I think, the internets all the time. Like the internets, look at me, I'm sounding so old. Watching like all the footage out there on Twitter, watching all the social media feeds, you see talent nonstop. So it's not like you can't get your name out there now. Back then, like I said, it was all dealing with the tape traders. If you could get your tape out to some company and get booked, right. It wasn't like there was, even back then, ROH didn't even start till 2002. So that wasn't even like, a lot of people now would be like, oh, get seen on ROH. ROH wasn't even a thing back then. There was nothing there actually for a good period of time. So you were just constantly sending your tapes in every week to WWF, hoping just one of the talent agents would see it. You know what I mean? And possibly use you or like you or something. And then the whole time you were just constantly trying to work out, because you were always told, get bigger and be noticed. You can't teach size. So it was just a constant trying to get noticed. If you were booked backstage, hopefully I'm look big enough or look different enough this time that Johnny will actually look at me instead of looking at a cell phone or as he's walking by, different times. Now they book you. Now you go on a website and you sign up, and I don't even know how that works now. I haven't been backstage in so long. So
now around this time too, you also toured Japan. How did all that come about? And just tell us a bit about your time in Japan.
So that was set up with Rick Bassman. UPW somehow signed a deal with 01 with Hashimoto and them, and so we started doing talent trades. So like Hashi and them would come out and wrestle every now and then or not Hashimoto, but a couple of guys would come out and work for UPW. And then a lot of the UPW guys would fly out and do tours in Japan. I was on, I think, the second group that went. So there were a lot of us went out there. It was like Tom Howard, Sylvester Terkay, me, Samoa Joe, the Ballards, Kazarian, Nova. Nav. It was a really good time, man. That was a fun time to be in the business. 01 had just started. They were like bouncing between the top three companies out there. So it was like New Japan, All Japan, Noah, and 01. You know what I mean? Like those were like the big ones going. And they were doing a thing with the NWA, so there was all the NWA wrestlers out there too. So it was like Carino and CW Anderson and all these guys. So that was a blast, man. Those tours would be like 2 weeks long, a month long at a time. It was a good time. Good time. But like I said, Bassman's the one that set all those up and got a lot of guys a lot of work. So
who'd you work with?
Created a lot of futures for a lot of guys too, because if I remember correctly, I think Spanky, one time there was like some light heavyweight tournament they were doing, and Bassman got all of Spanky, and Spanky drove from Boston all the way to LA did the show, drove all the way back to Boston, and after that started his career in 0-1, which was like his next like 3 years, I think, was just straight 0-1 matches. He was gone after that.
Wow. Talk about dedication.
Dude.
Now, who did you work with in Japan, and how long were you out there?
The first couple tours I did was me and Nav, and we were teaming as Native Blood. And I remember our first match was against Masato Tanaka and Shinjiro Otani for the NWA International Tag Titles. That was a blast because it was the first and only time I've ever seen, like, you know, they treat it like a real sport there. So we're the semi-main event, and they lowered the American and the Japanese flags and played our national anthems before the match started.
Wow.
It was awesome, man. That was such a good experience. And I really wish I wasn't so damn green at the time, because I really would have enjoyed it more. It would have been a better match. But again, I was only 2 years in.
Yeah.
And then I'm standing in a ring in Japan in a sold out Korakuen Hall. So it was really cool. But like I said, I kind of wish I was older when I did it. I had been in business longer. I would have appreciated it a lot more, I think. But that was fun. That was the first one. And then I remember a lot of times we worked with Masato and Shinjiro a few times, and we worked with them probably the most. Me and Nav did. And then I came out there in 2004, I started doing singles tours out there. And I worked with Hashimoto a couple times. I worked with him in Hustle. I was given a character called the Shoulder Hunter when he was getting ready for shoulder surgery. So I was called Katakari, the Shoulder Hunter, and I wrestled him in a match for Hustle House, and that was a great time. Hashimoto was so much fun to wrestle. And then I worked with Fujiwara a lot and a few of the other guys. There was a lot of guys out there. You know, we'd work with Carino, he's C-Dub. God, I can't even remember some of the guys' names. It was a while ago, but good times out there.
Now, when you toured out there, how long would you be out there for at any given time?
It varied, anywhere between a week to 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks a month. You know, it depended on who you were working, what the tour was, who you were. You know, it was different for everybody. Mm-hmm. Some guys went out there and we'd be leaving after 2 weeks, and they'd be out there for another 2 or 3. So I think my longest out there was 3.
Now, Dr. Tom Pritchard's gone on record saying he's only been to Japan a couple times, but he said being an American guy and getting accustomed to the style there and just working the grind all the time can be a bit of a challenge for the American guys. Did you find that to be the case for yourself?
No, not really. Like I said, it was different. We went out there the first couple times and was told all about this stuff about how strong style was this and that, and it was always going to be a fight. And so that's how we went out there with that mindset, and that was rough. But then when I started going out there on my own, and I remember working with guys, and I didn't do it like that, but we worked like we would normally, and it was great. So I think kind of if it gets in your head, if you go somewhere and you start trying to bang with them, like their style is that. So it wasn't bad for me. I'll just say that. I kind of learned real quick. Like I said, it's kind of same as the lucha style though. Like I just figured out real quick, if they really wanted you to go their way, they wouldn't book an American. So why change your style to match anybody else's? Mm-hmm. So they do their shit, I would do mine, and all of a sudden it seemed to work a lot better. Things would be a lot lighter. So the style was fine for me. If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
no. It makes perfect sense. If a luchador or a Japanese guy comes out here, why would he shift his style 2 hours when the whole draw is like, wow, there's a guy from Japan or Mexico here, Yeah.
So I remember when I went out there and the first couple of times we tried to do their style, strong style, and it sucked because I'd be getting blasted in the face. Of course, you hit anybody hard, they're going to hit you back friggin' hard. And if you're trying to go their style, well, they're not going to look weak, But then when I went out there, I just with Hashimoto, it was really the first one. I remember I went out there, and that one was more because I was like, oh man, I don't want to stiff the boss. And I didn't know I was working Hashimoto till I got out there. I didn't know who I was booked for. I just Bassman called me and goes, hey, you're going for, this show. And I go, cool. get out there, and the first thing they say is you're wrestling Hashimoto, and there's all these promotions going on, and I'm like, it's like, you know, being told, getting off a plane, being told you're wrestling Hulk Hogan. You're like, what? I'm wrestling the top guy in the company, like one of the three musketeers. Like, what? I'm wrestling who? and I remember I just went out there and just did my normal thing. I wrestled him like I would anybody else, just because I didn't want to. I remember I wanted to leave it up to him to see how it went, because I didn't want to stiff the boss and do something unprofessional. And I remember when I went out there and did that, it was the best ever. Like there was no issues whatsoever. And then every time I kept working like that out there for the next couple tours I did, and it was fine. Their stuff would look great, and I would be fine. And there was no, aside from being blown up, there wasn't any issues, you know.
Do you think a lot of guys in Japan that go to Japan today or go to Mexico or anywhere across the country, they kind of, like you said earlier, you were there for a specific reason. You were there and you were booked because of yourself. Do you think a lot of guys kind of forget that when they go overseas or different countries and kind of accommodate the other guys a little too much instead of?
I think they try to emulate them too much.
Over.
Yeah.
I think they try to emulate them too much.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like,
yeah. Yep.
Like if I want, I was always a huge fan of The Undertaker, right? I try to emulate at least his character whenever I would wrestle, especially when I wrestled as the Viking Wolf. You know what I mean? Like his presence, you know. But that doesn't mean that when I wrestled if I ever got a chance to wrestle The Undertaker, which would be awesome, I would ever try to do that same character work with him. I would have to bend to his style, you know what I mean? Because I'd want to make the best match possible. And I think when you try to do that too much, now you're having a contest of wills, and especially when it comes to a style like, say, Japanese wrestling, where their whole style is like a mixed martial arts. You start trying to swing mixed martial arts back with them, well, they're not going to look weak. They're going to start swinging it back harder, you know, and it just makes it. Some guys can do it. You got guys like, you know, Kenny Omega and them that wrestle their style and it looks banging. Not everybody can do that. And they don't want everybody to do that. Let's be honest, you know, at least in my opinion. I think when you try to emulate it too much, you wind up just kind of convoluting it. And now it just becomes, what story is there to tell? You know, that's my biggest thing. That's like, if like I said, if I was The Undertaker, I wouldn't want to go out and try to, I like The Undertaker, I wouldn't want to go out and try to wrestle The Undertaker as The Undertaker.
Yeah.
No, it's going to wind up just being like a lot of things you see, where it's just too much give and take, and too much give back and forth. There's not really a story that falls into it. So that's my thing on it, you know, if that makes sense. I don't know.
It makes complete sense.
Yeah. I'm high and I get hit that a lot. I don't know what to say.
Well, it's like when Rick Rude went to Japan a few times and wrestled in All Japan. He was ravishing Rick Rude. He wasn't trying to be, you know, pro wrestling wrestlers, you know.
Yeah, and like I remember, like when I would go, I did a lot of my stuff in Mexico, and there's always the guys that would go down and do the lucha stuff with the luchadors and try to, you know, and go to the lucha schools and get good at doing lucha. But I remember I got taught real quick, and I was like, they're not booking you right now as who you are because you do lucha. They're booking you because of who you are. So go down there and wrestle as you are and bend to their style and make them look good and be their base. And then have them just sell to your style. Yeah. You know, and every time I would do that would be great, because especially like with people that have because there's a lot of, you know, ego in wrestling, especially in certain places where you go into, like, I'll say it in the same places in Mexico, it's sometimes rather rough. There's a lot of egos, you know, especially with an American coming in or something like that. So when you bend to their style more and you don't try to outshine them, I guess, at their style, that kind of makes it so they're not so quick to get that ego fight going. You know what I mean? So like I said, like I never ever really did anything short of maybe a lucha move now and then that they would show me just to do a spot. I would go out there and I would wrestle the exact same way. I would do all the stuff that they did. I would take all their stuff. And then when I came to my turn, I would wrestle like an American wrestler, because that's who they booked, was an American wrestler, not a luchador from America. And it always made the matches good, and it always made me never have any issues with any of the guys,
Mm-hmm.
because there was never, usually any way that I was trying to outshine them at their style, and it makes, again, a draw, because guess what? Those fans there have been watching luchadors, watching Japanese wrestling.
Yeah.
That's what they see every day. So when you bring in someone, say from Germany or from America or from that, they don't want to see you do their style. Those fans want to see what they've seen on TV and see you do your style. And so that makes you stand out too. Even if the match isn't any good, there's a whole slew of foreign wrestlers that have gone and done their style and like lucha and everything, and the matches aren't any good. But you'll never tell by the way that the fans reacted, because it got the point across.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I think that's something that a lot of wrestlers now, especially when they get to wrestle in a place they like, or a place that they've seen, or against someone they like, they've been watching so much, they try to emulate it too much instead of just doing their thing.
Very good. Very good point.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kris, I'm going to let you kind of take over here. I know you and this guy have crossed paths a few times over the years, and go ahead.
Yeah, what was when you were you with Navajo, and then I know we're singles, but back in NWA, I want to say 08 through 10, we must have crossed paths a few times, but a lot of time.
I remember with the NWA, I was over there with Nav and them when we did the original tapings, when it was at CBS Studios, I think it was, or something like that, and we were doing the original set with Oliver John and Blue Demon when he was the champ, Trevor Murdoch and Lance Cade. Did
you do shows NWA in Vegas at the Plaza?
I didn't do any of the shows at the NWA in Vegas. I had done the NWA Hollywood ones, and then I didn't do. There was a couple times there after a while. Me and Nav and everybody, we all kind of had a parting of ways, so I didn't work there a lot until I think 2010ish, and I started going out there and doing some stuff again with Bull, with what was his name? He was the caveman, Big Bull, from Texas, and he would come Manimal. I'd go out there with Manimal,
yeah.
And I would do some shows out there then. So I didn't really have a lot of most of the NWA work I did was with in Arizona, with the NWA Arizona, and with like when NWA Hollywood or Marquez would come through Arizona.
Right.
I think I know I worked with you at Mex PW, I believe.
Mex Pro, Mex PW. That was
which just popped up on my timeline actually the last couple days. And I was looking at it, and I remember telling some of my students at my school that was the first time, A, that I damn near bled more than the hardcore main event match, and B, that I ever heard a "Please Don't Tap" chant at a primarily hardcore show. Like that was, I remember, a really fun match. I remember the buildups of the promos that you and Sheik were cutting on me and everything. I remember that was a really fun time. That match was fun. I remember that crowd was crazy.
And I think that was 2012, and
something like that.
And a few years later, I think right around that time too, like let's say maybe a few years later, it was like you kind of you have your hardcore shows now, but that was the end of that wave too, of that Wild West fan base, at least for those hardcore shows, because then I want to say we crossed paths in the West Coast Wrestling Connection up in Oregon.
Oh, I'm sure. I was there for years. I'd leave and come back and leave and come back. I was up in Oregon with Manning for probably since like 2006 or 7, I think.
Yeah. Morty Lipships. What did he go by?
Jeff Manning, Mark Manning, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, well, I did the announcing with him. I should remember exactly. Lipschitz, right?
Lipschitz. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But no, I mean, we definitely must have crossed paths there, because that was 2016, 17. But that was a lot of. But that was a lot of come in. At least for I came in and then boom, we were just out there calling the matches and we were done. Everybody just left. It was just TV. It was just strictly television.
That was the same. That was when I was working for them at Paragon too. So we would do Paragon, and then I would fly up there because it was me and my tag partner Dom and Paragon, and then it was me up there in West Coast. So I would fly up there, and I think it was what D'Lo was. D'Lo was one of our agents, and Gangrel, and I think who else was up?
Grappler.
Fidel was up, but Grappler was there. Fidel, Cuban Assassin, be up there being an agent every now and then. I worked with I was in that stable with the Grappler 3 with Baden and Manning's guys up there. We would have definitely run on those shows because I was there the whole last year. I think the last year they were running.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good experience. It was good. It was a good experience for the young guys to really learn how television ran.
It was cool because there was, like I said, you got to work with a lot of the good, like you got good coaches to work with. He'd always have guys like Matt Stryker there or D'Lo, who was always great to tear apart your matches or help you coach those matches or age those matches. Getting used to working camera angles and everything else. That was a good time. I remember I did a lot of stuff with Adam Thornstowe up there, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun in the ring.
Good stuff.
It was a good time up there. Yeah, I really enjoyed Oregon. I had started up there with Jeff well before he ever had TV or before he was doing anything like that. When he was still wasn't even running in Portland, he was running in the outskirts, and it was cool to see how he had changed it into the TV when I went back there in 2016 from when I left in like 2012, 2013.
Very cool.
They were still just doing gyms. So it was a good time. Yeah. We would definitely have to have run in on those.
Yeah, we go to the TVs, spend the night at the motel before we fly out the next day, and in the hotel on local cable, we would be watching the show from the last tour we did to come in. It was kind of cool, kind of.
Yeah, what we do, we'd come in for a month, or we'd come in every month and do a weekend of what, like
it was the old
4 tapings a night, like.
Yeah, and it just like the superstars, the Raws, the challenges. We're there for a long time, and the fans are there for a long time.
I remember there was one time I showed up and I was literally in like 7 segments on like the shows. I was doing run-ins. I was attacking people. I was in a match. I had a segment in the back where I had to eat like a raw steak on camera.
Oh,
it was like, do you remember that? Like
yeah.
And I was like nonstop running. I'd get done doing one thing and I'd have to run and do another thing because we're nonstop filming all these shows. So I'm like running, having to do that. And I remember the last thing was I had to like dry off from the match and then eat this freaking raw steak.
I remember that, man.
You remember that? Yeah. Nobody knew I was going to eat the steak. They didn't know what I was going to do. They just held the steak up and told me to, attack it. And I just started devouring this thing in the nastiest, grossest, most like rabid way possible, where there's like flesh flying everywhere. It's just stuck in my goatee. That was great.
Circa Sika, the head shrinkers.
Yes, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, man.
I was all blown up.
Right. Perfect.
Oh, yeah. Good times.
Yeah, man.
Good times. Yeah, there were.
Do you know whatever happened to Paragon Pro? Because I know they had a TV deal that was running nationally for a little while.
As far as I know, just like any wrestling company, unfortunately, it just ran out of money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's a saying in wrestling. I'm not sure if that's the way, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened because I think he was going pretty strong. Unfortunately, there's an old saying in wrestling. If you want to make $1 million, start with 2. But eventually you're going to run out, once you start with 2, you're only down to 1, you're going to lose out after that. So,
right.
It's a rough business, man. Like again, even promoters sometimes I think forget just having TV isn't necessarily what makes the money, man. You got to get, you got to sell the houses first. And then if you have TV, the whole TV deal is to keep selling your houses and to sell your commercial spots. You got to make your money. If you're not making a viable profit, you're not going to be able to pay the wrestlers. And if the wrestlers, that's just the problem, especially with a lot of guys these days. A lot of the new generation, I think, is they don't realize, they don't treat it like the business it is. I think that's how come they don't care about their bodies as much for the most part. This is a tangent I'm just about to go off on real quick, but I don't think they realize that beat wrestling doesn't sell wrestling. You know what I mean? It's promotions, and it's a lot of hard work that sells the actual art of wrestling. Wrestling sells the people once they get in the doors. You got to sell them to come in through the doors first.
Yeah, right.
And so as a wrestler, if you're not putting asses in those seats, then you're not. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not marketable, you're not bringing them in. So that's today. There's a lot of wrestlers that don't realize that, and they're just whining because they're like, "I'm such a good wrestler. Why am I not on the show? Or why am I in this spot on the show? Or why am I this? Or why am I that?" And if you're not bringing people in the seats, then maybe you need to reflect, and that's not your wrestling. Go do something else to become more marketable. Right. You know what I mean? That's unfortunately what a lot of companies find out too, is if they don't know how to market their wrestlers. You could have Hulk Hogan. If nobody knows he's there, you ain't making money for having Hulk Hogan. You're just paying for Hulk Hogan to be there. You know? So that's what a lot of, I think, like guys like Paragon, unfortunately, forgot, is you could bring in all the talent in the world. Yeah. And you can have great shows. But if you're not bringing in if you're not filling those coffers after the end of every show, eventually you're going to have an empty bank account.
Yeah. All for nothing.
All for nothing. You got great shows, but at the end of the day, what's that? It's just a bunch of tape. Ain't nobody going to watch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Good point.
It'll wind up on a dollar store DVD stand somewhere for, classic wrestling in 20 years.
Yeah.
Which is a crappy thing to say, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's a rough business.
Mm-hmm.
Really? That's why I'm thankful to say I've managed to make it 25 years of making money in the business, making a career out of it somehow. I don't know how, but being a virtual unknown.
Some of your injuries. I know you've had some pretty gnarly injuries over the years. How have you overcome some of those things? And just tell us a little bit about, because I know you've told me backstage a few major injuries you've had that would put most people out for good.
Yeah, I've had a few. I blew my knee out in 2004, and I blew my ACL out. And 2 weeks later, I got a call to go to Japan, so I duct taped it and did a 2-week tour of Japan. Then never had it fixed again until 2014. That was a bad one. So that was 10 years alone of just hard wrestling right there, and I did a lot in that 10 years. I got hit on the side of my head once when I was in a match, and my neck was kinked when it happened, so it wound up giving at the weakest point, which was my C4. That was fun. So I remember I got paralyzed in the ring for about 7 minutes. I was like, half my body wouldn't move. Yeah, that was a scary one. Let's see, what else? I broke both my wrists at the same time. Came off the top rope and both my wrists snapped because I came off with my fists closed and they popped. I got hit on the side of the head once and that one, this chair folded over the side of my head, courtesy of one of my best friends in the world, because he didn't realize I wasn't ready for it. And that messed me up really bad. I don't really know exactly what that did to me. Wow. That one was, I didn't go to the doctor for that, and I really should have. That one I remember. To this day, there's still parts of my head that are still kind of like tender from that. I don't know if that was exactly the cause of it, but that one rocked me. And then there's been a lot of injuries. Most recently, I tore my quad, partially tore my quad in our school one day. Most recently in my last match, I tore my pec. I had a grade 2 tear in my upper pec. You just start getting old, man. Things just start breaking, especially in this business. After a long time, you go so long with little nagging injuries that become major injuries, and you just don't get things fixed, or you're super tight from wrestling for weeks on end, and then you just take the wrong step and something pops, or you get hit in the corner the right way and something snaps. been a lot of gnarly injuries. Hell, even that time with you at MXPW, when I split my head open.
Oh yeah,
in the ring post, and now when I remember, that thing was still bleeding the next day.
Oh.
I should have gone and got staples for that. The only reason I did it is because Sheik told me I was going to be a sissy he literally told me, because I wake up in the morning and I'm still bleeding out of my head, and I was like, man, I guess I should go get stitches. And he goes, yeah, I'd go get stitches too. Well, I was a sissy. So I super glued my head back again, because I had super glued it the night before and it didn't hold. I super glued it again, had his wife super glued it again, and we went to breakfast. So now I got this big gnarly scar on the top of my head. But you know, but at the same time, I've had a lot of injuries. Like, I've broken bones, I've hurt my neck, I've hurt my knees. You know, I've done all that. But honestly, it's probably no more than a lot of the guys that have given their life to the business have done. You know, there's a lot of guys in my same spot who are 25 years in, 20 years in. They've done the same things. You know, I think it's just that we're from that era where a lot of us just didn't get it fixed, you know, or waited to the very last possible moment to get it fixed. Because I know guys like me, especially, I was making a good part of my money, if not all of it, at times from wrestling. So I couldn't really go get things fixed. I would just super glue it or duct tape it, and then eventually that leads to other injuries. You know, I tore my quad or my hamstring once jogging, getting ready for. We were getting looked at by WWE the next day. It was one of the times when they actually really booked us for the show to do the in ring work, the in ring rolling around at the beginning of the show, and I was jogging with my tag partner, and my hamstring tore because my knee was bad from tearing my ACL 10 years before, and so I tore my complete hamstring tear the day before WWE looked at. You know, wrestling, the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
You know? Hell, most recently I had MRSA too. My leg almost fell off. I didn't even realize, and I went back on the road, and I had the docs look at me, and they're like, "Oh shit, we need to take care of that." So that was bad. Some of us are dumb. Don't realize we're hurt until it's too late.
Well, tell us a little bit what you're up to now. I know you have a wrestling school out in Arizona. Why don't you tell us about that and what else you're, doing in professional wrestling, if you're doing anything at all?
So right now, a few years ago, about 5 years ago, my tag team partner Doms and one of the guys out here that named John Wolfgang opened up a wrestling school, and I started training there as the head trainer. That was in 2019, I believe. In 2018, 2019. And so since then, that was the Arizona Pro Wrestling Training Academy or Training Center. And for the last 5 years, we've been just nonstop pushing out talent. We've trained guys like we have a lot of our own homegrown talent, like Kevin Koa and Samaya and Devin Reno. We've just been pushing them out, training them really hard. Our guys go through a rigorous training. Most of them, when I say pushing them out, it takes about 2 years to get trained with us. And then you got to go on our shows first. We've been running a Phoenix Championship Wrestling out here in Arizona. We've been also running another one, which is called Slam U, which is the student show. That's the ones that originally how it started was our students, as part of their training, had to find a venue and book a show and figure every last bit of that show out down to how the ring is getting there. And that was part of their training, and that's how the Slam U company started again. It was originally run, the first year of the shows was run by our students. And now that does a lot of our charity work. So we're running Phoenix Championship Wrestling every 2 months, once every other month here in Arizona. And then for all the charity work and things like that and community events, Slam U goes out and entertains all the kids and does all the things with the community. And then we've just been nonstop doing classes I think we open a new class every 3 to 6 months at the Arizona Pro Wrestling Training Center. And that's all we've been doing. Just trying to retrain the future of the business, getting new good talent out there, guys and girls that respect the business and get trained with as many people as they can that actually have had workings in the business. So there, besides me and Dom training there, We got guys like Joe Graves doing some of the training. We got Hammerstone stopping in there every now and then when he's not on the road. We got our guy Max, who used to be in a WWE, and we just really focus on getting these kids the best training they can and teaching them to be killers, man. Teaching them that the world's not gonna to give anything to them, and they got to make their way in it and do their best and be cutthroat. So we got some killers out here. You guys better watch out.
Now, if anybody wants to join your wrestling school, how would they go about doing that?
Just go on Instagram or Facebook, anywhere, and just search the hashtag #TrainInAZ. It's the easiest way. We spent a long time really building up that hashtag, so it's easier for people to find. Just hashtag, like I said, #TrainInAZ, and you'll find all the information. That's our handle on Twitter, or I'm sorry, not on Twitter. It probably is on Twitter too. I don't have Twitter. On Instagram. And then on Facebook, you search under that, or just look under the Arizona Pro Wrestling Training Center. That'll pop up all the information you need.
Awesome.
And like I said, we not everybody can get in. We actually are very strict about our admittance. Everybody's got to do a tryout. They got to set up a appointment first to be interviewed by the office to make sure that they're able to do this. And then we go from there after the tryout. So, and then they spend the first 6 weeks not even able to touch the ring. Like I said, it's hard. We don't do shortcuts where we're at. We're not there to turn and burn and put people out and just get them out there in the business with 3 months of training and tell them they're pro wrestlers.
Right.
So we actually tell people when they sign up, we are training. We're not training you to be a weekend warrior. We're training you for a job. So it's kind of that old school mentality from back when I was a kid, of what we wanted at like UPW and everything. You know what I mean? We like I said, nowadays guys just show up and half the indies look like they should be working in Taco Bell. You know, I hate to say it. So we try to instill in our guys that, we're supposed to be superheroes and supervillains. We're supposed to look the part as well as act the part. So we teach them everything from gym to ring work to how to handle themselves backstage to how the proper etiquette is when you're talking to everything. Mm-hmm. So just the way we were trained, that I think kind of gotten forgotten in the last couple of years.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you a thought-provoking question here. We had Dusty Wolf on recently, and we've also had guys like, Larry Lane on and other old school guys that have been around for a very long time. We asked the question, and Kris, you could chime in on this too with Gallo if you want to. They pretty much said the way that they learned wrestling and the old school way that we grew up watching is pretty much a thing of the past, and they don't think it would work today.
Not that it wouldn't work. It would have to be, and because I think me and like Dom ourselves have proven that it's not that it wouldn't work. You just have to modernize it. People still want to believe. People know the workings of the business, but they know magic is fake too. They still go see David Copperfield try to walk through the wall. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like they still want to be made to say that one was probably real.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is just the guys themselves nowadays don't treat it like that. I've been noticing a lot. I've been saying this to a lot of people recently, and I think this probably relates directly to that, is especially lately, the business itself isn't so much a business anymore. I mean, you got your upper business, WWE, AEW, stuff like that. But for the most part, the indies aren't a business anymore. And they haven't been since really the buyout of WCW. They had died down since the territory days before that, but there was still money to be made on the indies. And there still is money to be made on the indies. So a lot of guys are doing it. But the business went through a phase there after WCW and everything shut down because there was nowhere to go, where it ceased to be a business, a viable business for guys, and it became a hobby. So you have all these half-trained people that were hobbyists that never made money starting to train people that were trained by people that were never taught the business side, never learned the business side. They never had to. There was no business to learn. So they train these guys. Then they train other guys that are the same way. So by the time you get to now, it's been 10 or 15 years of guys that really had nowhere to go. They were just training to work on the weekends. You know what I mean? So I think that directly relates to that too, is when you have guys that think like that, they don't think on how to make that draw or make that story believable or make the old school style believable. I think you can. You just have to modernize it. You have to know certain things. UFC is real. So if you're going to do anything, it has to be along the style that you have to believe it's real too. And you have to make it look like that. That's not hard.
Mm-hmm.
There's no difference from doing that than doing an old school hip toss. You just got to change your pattern of thinking. You know what I mean? And you got to realize that now there's the internet. See, that's the new TV. So you got to use the internet to your advantage. And how do you use the internet? Well, now you got to use the marks. That before you used to just use the magazines, but now they have the internet and they talk about it. They talk nonstop. So if you try to do a story, they're going to tear it apart. So why don't you let them tell the story for you and just feed off them? So once you use all those three things together, and I've done it with Dom before and a few other people, you start seeing where they're going and you take them an exact opposite path. And they start getting mad because they can't guess anything. And you start using the internet against them, and by using them, it's I don't know how really to explain it, but you can do it. I've done it a bunch of times. Hell, me and Sheik did it that time in front of that show with you in just a match. You just got to do stuff that's believable. There's nothing. That match actually is an excellent point of just a single match of how to do it. We didn't do anything more than punch kick in that match. I got my head cracked open hitting a ring post, which was the most believable thing in there because it was 100% real. But if you really think about it, we didn't tell a complicated story. We did an old school match where it was a good guy versus a bad guy, and that crowd got 100% behind it, and that was a smart mark crowd.
Yeah.
And it's just because we believed it.
Yeah. There you go.
Ultimately, that's what it's down to.
Yeah.
Hobbyists don't believe it because to them it was never a hobby. They never had to believe it to make money. Believe it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Dom and myself used to beat the hell out of each other. There was one time where he and I were selling the shows out when we first in 2010 for this place called EXW. And the funny thing is Dom worked for me at that bar that we were doing the shows at. I was the head of security there. Dom was my door guy. The fans came to that bar. They legitimately believed that me and Dom hated each other and would meet on these shows to beat each other up, even though I was his boss at this bar. Because of how we would act there too. I would come out and make them start cleaning the floor with like a friggin' toothbrush in front of these guys. And they literally believed that I was his asshole boss. So you can make anybody believe anything again. So I don't know. I think that old school style, I think they might be wrong on that. I just think the style that they did it in is what's dead, not the old school style.
Right.
You know? I think that's where all my ramblings was going. It's not so much the styles dead, it's just the way of doing it.
Yeah.
Got to modernize it. And you got to have fun with it. And you got to believe it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too today it's frowned upon and a lot of which I don't agree with at all, but it's frowned upon if you take wrestling seriously when you're in the wrestling business, which is like, oh my gosh, you guys are missing the whole point. And because they're afraid that they're going to look like a mark that believes it's real. That's what we're there, is to make you believe it's real. You know, it's
I think it's like a weird give and take. I think it's like a 50-50 on that, because it's like you want to believe it and you have to believe it. Like, I'm sorry, Samoa Joe is the most believable wrestler there is right now. Him or like Walter, probably one of those two, but Samoa Joe especially. He comes out and you believe he's going to kick the hell out of you. Yeah. You look at him, you believe he's a fighter. If he looked at you and said, I'm a pro wrestler, you would not tell him it was fake, right? I think like that I get hit in the head a lot. I totally lost track of this conversation where we were going with this. I'm sorry. My head just
taking everything, the boys back.
Seriously. So he takes it seriously. You know what I mean? You look at him, he takes it seriously. But at the same time, you have to realize that seriousness ends in the ring and the application to the ring. Like, you can't bring it into the backstage, because at the end of the day, if you have that same attitude in the backstage, you forget that we're still just oiling ourselves up and going and fighting for fake belts. So there is a 50-50 on that. You just got to know where it's at. You know what I mean? Like I said, the minute you go into that ring, you have that Joe mentality. It's great. Just don't know where to drop it off. You know what I'm saying? because then it gets rather annoying in the back when you believe it too much, and you're like, look, man, if you really want to do MMA, just go do MMA.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I find in here too, a lot of guys are afraid of getting heat. Like, a lot of heels are afraid to offend people nowadays.
Heels don't want to be heels nowadays. Heels don't want to be heels, and heels want to be the cool heel and want to be cheered, and baby faces want to be the bad guys that get cheered. So it's like there's no real heels, there's no real baby faces. It's kind of a tweener universe right now, and that makes it hard for people to follow anything. It makes them hard to know who to cheer for. It makes them, it's just an issue. A good heel should try to make the crowd hate him and shouldn't care about cheering. His job is to make that baby face become the savior of the people and make that baby face feel danger and make that baby face be the one the peoples want to see be the shining white knight. And if you can't make them hate you, then they're never going to love that person to the extent they can, or they should, if that makes sense. Like, and it's an equal good problem too, because honest, like as bad as it is, as hard as it is to be a good heel, it's even harder to be a good face, because it is ultimately and infinitely more easier to get a crowd to hate you than it is to get a crowd to love you.
Yeah.
That's how come guys like The Rock didn't get over as a babyface at first, because they were force feeding him. They didn't believe it. So it's got to be natural. But that is a hell of a lot easier to be natural and and to practice being a good babyface if you have a guy that actually wants to be a heel and get booed. But nobody wants to get booed anymore. They want to do heel stuff that pops the crowd and gets them to laugh and cheer and be like, oh, they're the cool guys.
Yeah.
They're the new NWO, or they're the new Bullet Club, or they're this or that. But that's not what you're supposed to do. Like, I pride myself on the simple fact that anytime I was a heel, they would hit my music and that crowd would start crapping on me the minute that music came on. You just got to not care about their feelings, because that's what you're supposed to do. And what they don't realize, a lot of people don't realize, is the more you make them boo you, the more you make them hate you, the more you make them want to buy your merch just to throw it back in your face, the more they're wanting to turn and love you for the biggest babyface turn in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because people also don't think about the future. They just think about right now and right here.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm not getting cheered, and it hurts my feelings. That's what it is. People take it too personal.
Yeah.
Nobody likes getting booed. I tell you what, I used to love getting booed. I love getting booed more than I like getting cheered. I used to love watching them get so mad at me. They'd like be throwing their sodas, and they'd be walking up and trying to like fight me, especially in Oregon. In Oregon, there was a lot of them rednecks that would come out of those bleachers, and they'd want to kill me when I was a heel there. And I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
My whole goal as a heel was to try to get them to rush the ring. If I could get them to do some Puerto Rico bullcrap, I would have won that day, and that was my job. If I could make them go home and just talk about me for days that they wanted to stick me with a knife, that's if I made that grandma talk the next day as she was stirring her eggs about how bad she wanted to beat me with that spatula, I did my job. That made me happy. Nobody likes that these days. They don't want to do that, I used to love that. That makes me happy now thinking about it. I wish I could go cut promos and hurt people's feelings right now. I love it.
And that was your job. You got over by doing that.
It was great. I loved it. It was so much easier to be a heel to me. It was so hard to be a face because I had to, I guess I'm a likable guy, but I'm not really a likable guy. It's a lot easier to get people to boo me. But like I said, that always made for the best face runs though too.
Yeah.
I'd be a heel for a long time, and then one thing turn you into the instant baby face. Because they're so, and then when you turn heel again, it's even bigger, and it just is a never-ending circle,
It's like what's the most iconic moment in Star Wars history is when Darth Vader came around finally. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he did the babyface turn at the end of Return of the Jedi, it was the biggest deal. You spent 2.5 movies, building this guy up to be the devil.
Yeah.
And then he does the babyface turn at the end. And all of a sudden, he's the greatest guy in the world.
Yes.
You know what I mean? All his past sins are forgiven.
Yeah.
That's wrestling in a nutshell.
That's right. Right. And all the Star Warses that came out before and after, since, it's like that's still like arguably the most iconic moment, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is a wrestling
the
show.
whole thing.
The whole thing. You get the baby face, you get the comeback in the beginning, you get the heel comeback in the Return of the, or in the Empires, or the, what is it, the Empire Strikes Back. You get your heat. The heels come back. They get their heat. It's almost like a 3-fall lucha match. You got your baby faces over the first, you got your heel comeback in the second, and then you got your heel heat in the last one with the baby face comeback at the end.
Amazing, right? Amazing.
Who would have thought it would work? Who knows? It's almost, wow, it's like wrestling's a movie or something.
Right. I think Darth Vader would want to get booed before that happened. Exactly.
You do, because then it makes the fear so much better. You know?
What's the point?
Especially since the fans going, I don't know why I'm cheering for you, but I just love you now. It's great.
Yeah.
And then when you turn back on them again, they're like, oh, I hate you so much more because I loved you. It's great.
Yeah, I gave you a chance and you dropped the ball. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. And just like an abusive relationship, they're still there waiting to get that little crumb of goodness to be like, oh, he wants to be a good guy again.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's really an abusive relationship if you really think about it.
Right. Pro wrestling. That's it. Yeah.
Kris, before we close out, is there anything else you would like to throw in here?
Oh, I know. I want to thank you for your time, Gabe. And it was really cool hearing everything. Very interesting. And personally,
I ramble a lot. I apologize.
No, we thank you for
great. We
thank you for
love hearing this.
We thank you for the rambling, and also on a personal level, good to go down memory lane. It's been a few years since we crossed paths, so this was awesome. Thanks for sharing everything, and good catching up with you, man.
Yeah, thanks for talking. Thanks for letting me just come on here and ramble a little bit, guys. It was kind of fun. It was a good time. I don't do a lot of these, so
cool.
It's a good time. Good seeing you all too. Haven't seen you in forever.
Yeah.
Now, before we close out, I'd like to give both you, Gallo, and both you, Kris, plugs. This is your forum now. Gallo, I'll let you go first. Anybody that wants to get a hold of you, whether it be for, wrestling bookings, wrestling seminars, maybe even personal training so you look like a wrestler. Like, is there shout outs you'd like to give or any info about how people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can just get a hold of me. I'm usually more responsive on my Instagram, so just get a hold of me. It's at King of No Rules. You can also email me, book Gabriel Gallo at hotmail.com. I still got a Hotmail account. It's pretty cool. And then if you want to look into the training out here in Arizona, like I said, Instagram's the best place to go. They'll have all the information for the website. It's the handle's at TrainingAZ, or you can search under hashtag TrainingAZ. Like I said, you can get a hold of me on either one of those forums. Either there, you can go there and you can get all the information about training and how to book yourself into a class, or you can reach out to me, like I said, through my handle at King of No Rules.
I think I got you. Okay, thank you. I think I got you beat on the Hotmail. My email is chriscloss1@aol.com.
That's like my girlfriend. She has the same thing. She has AOL too. That's crazy.
OG,
you guys are
baby.
Dinosaurs.
Yeah. Hey, we're keep it real, man. Keep it OG. Like you see, KRISKLOSS, the number 1 at AOL.com, or my name, Kris Kloss, on Facebook. Still announcing here and there. MPW with Logan X, Puto Rasu with Durango and all those guys. Talking with Great North Wrestling right now, and aside from wrestling, as far as nonprofits, charities that want to do fundraisers, charity auctioneer, would love to help generate donations and growth for your nonprofit, your charity. So you can hit me up if you're in that. If you're interested in getting a charity auctioneer, again, KrisKloss1 at AOL.com, and my name, Kris Kloss, on Facebook.
Awesome, Kris. Well, let's take this home.
Yeah, let's do this. Once again, Gabe, thank you very much. Proud to have as our guest Gabriel Gallo here, one of the great legends, veterans, Southwest superstar. And thank you once again, sir. And for Eric Melikian, as always, thank you. And for all of us, my name is Kris Kloss. This has been the Wrestling with Reality podcast. Thank you, guys. Thank you, fans. And we will see you all right here next time.
Thanks.